After a long delay, the post-war, well, Cold War Western Bloc pack is finally releasing. And sadly, due to some time constraints on my end, I cannot really go into full-on history and show-offs on all the tanks, so I'll be kind of rushing through this. I apologize for that inconvenience, and I hope you guys will enjoy the video nonetheless. So, featuring the pack is gotta be a whole bunch of tanks. Really quite a long list, and that's again why I'm gonna be zooming through them so fast. And first we're gonna be talking about some French tanks. AMX ELC BIS, made by Mumu. Very small, light tank, prototype. Very big 90mm gun for what is only an 8-ton tank in Sprocket. Of course, big gun, small tank, means a very long reload. And we got some other prototypes by the same creator, Mumu. This is going to be the AMX Leclerc prototype. One of the more modern tanks for what is still the Cold War period. Only kind of beaten out by the 2A4 and the M1A1 Abrams. Other tanks would be all post-Cold War. This tank already would be a very big leap in like design principles for the French, as it moved away from the oscillating turrets and go onto real MBT design. So it's very different, but it's still just a prototype. So yeah. Moving on, we got some Centurions. Centurions being just starting to come out just after World War II. This is the Mark III modification, which modifies the pretty much the entire design, enlarged it a little bit, different turrets, mounting in 84mm 20-pounder cannon, and was the first uses of a stabilizer. So of course in Sprocket, this is modeled through a very stable suspension. This one has not been file manipulated to give it a very godlike gunner that could keep it stable just by putting a shoulder on this gun. So we don't have any of that sorts, but we do have a very stable ride. And this one is being made by Leo M252. And alongside the other two Centurions, they're actually all three made by different designers. So this is the Mark V RAAC, and sadly I don't really know anything about this design. It was given to me by a Japanese user that goes by the name Aru, and he didn't provide me with any information how it's different from the normal Mark V, so I really can't really go into this history much. Of course, if somebody does know about something about this tank, you can comment down in the description below to talk about it. And this is actually going to be a recurrence, as there's a lot of kind of like obscure prototypes in here that I just really don't know anything about, as I am a World War II tank enthusiast, not as much of a Cold War enthusiast. So that's where gonna be the big loss of knowledge base coming from. Again, if somebody does know something about this tank or some of the future tanks that I'll be showing, please let me know. So we have a Mark V-1 made by Yayitmi. And this one is actually looking very different from the other Centurions. Very different design, also very different front plates, turret, and everything really. Again, sadly I don't know too much about this build. If somebody knows more, please comment down below. But that's the Centurion Mark V-1. Now we're going to be looking at the last Centurion-based design we got here, with the FE4005, which was a prototype for big guns and their recoil mechanisms, basically. Although Cone of Arc actually has made a very good video on this one very recently, so if you want to know a lot more about the vehicle, you can check him out, as I really don't know nearly as much about the subject compared to him. But goddamn, this gun is big, and you could actually flip over this tank if you like shoot it in an unfavorable moment. If you like were like right here and you were to shoot, you will definitely flip over the tank, as it's already very top heavy. The gun being as high up as it is definitely doesn't help. And overall, Sprocket is really just as much of a meme build as it is in real life. So yeah, you guys go have fun with that one. Now we're gonna go over to some German tanks with the Leopard 1, which has been file manipulated to actually have a stabilizer, although that's not entirely accurate. So if you guys really want to have like complete accuracy, you guys might want to file manipulate the loader BTB back to normal. but for now this one actually has a stabilizer. Actually, the gunner has to go back to normal. My bad there. And this one was actually the main battle tank for Germany. After World War II, this was their first design. It was very popular, and it introduced the L7 105mm gun on like a very mobile chassis. Even though the gun was originally British, the Germans did modernize the gun with different ammunition types to compare to what the British put into there. And that really what made the L7 as popular as it is during that time. We do have a 1A3 model as well, which has a different turret and loss of mobility, but it has the same gun still. All of the Leopards on this pack are made by Excalibur 117. So yeah, this guy really likes his Leopards, and this is just one out of the 4 that he made. And the sword is actually very reminiscent of the Leopard 2K turret, which we'll be looking at in a moment. But it's also very distinctly different at the same time. So here we got the Leopard 2K. Prototype for the Leopard 2 with the 120mm gun, which would be ultimately be chosen for the Leopard 2 design. But it also featured a very big 20mm autocannon on the turret roof, which was ultimately discarded in the production designs, alongside hull changes and all that jazz. But it is still a very popular prototype, of course, because it is the prototype of one of the most powerful tanks in the world right now. And then lastly, we've got a 2A4 main battle tank, fully stabilized 120mm gun on a chassis that has full-on composite armor, good mobility, very well protected, and overall a very strong main battle tank. Number 2s are still going strong today with the A7 modification, and the 2A4 was the last one before they went on to the iconic arrowhead turret. So this still has the square head turret front. Now some prototypes that I don't really know much about. M1TTB. It kind of makes me think of a T14 Armada prototype, but I honestly don't know from which nation this is or what it was designed to be. But if you actually remove the composite armor from the turret of the T14 Armada, you would kind of get a turret like this. Unmanned turret, and the hull is very kind of reminiscent of that of a T14 Armada. So if people would actually confirm that theory that this is actually a T14 Armada prototype, I would love to know, but I am really not sure. Again, the DAM1 designation really doesn't make sense for Russian prototype tanks. So it's probably from some other nation that tested unmanned turrets, but I'm honestly clueless about this one. So please let me know if you guys know more. We have an M113 armed personnel carrier. It's exactly the same as from the post-war pack, so I will not be taken out for a spin. Still made by Nova. And the M1 TTB was, by the way, was made by Turtman Jones. And now we're gonna go over to the M1A1 Abrams made by Capricorn. I hope I'm not butchering that name too much. So it's fully stabilized tank, 120mm gun, a very powerful tank, but Abrams tanks are actually being replaced in the near future by a new design that's coming up by the American Army. So kind of be able to appreciate this thing in its last glory days before it gets retired. It's kind of nice, and of course, it is one of the most iconic things in the world, being scores made by Merca, which is probably the most well-known faction of World War II for most Western countries. And, of course, his influence kept on growing only after the war, just kept on growing and never stopped. Of course, that's why this M1 Abrams ends up being one of the most well-known tanks. Of course, the Tiger 1 is also very well-known from World War II, but for modern battle tanks, probably the Abrams that's the most well-known. So now we're gonna on to some of the real Cold War kind of stuff. The real Cold War stuff. M48A1 Pennon, made by Apollo 1641. This design actually has a very nice engine deck in the back and some very small details in the front, but the rounded turret that's very iconic for the M48 is of course lacking, as such turret doesn't exist yet in Sprocket, and unless you are making it entirely with plating, it's really generally smarter to wait until Hamish Dune decides to release the rounded turret updated. But yeah, it's still a very nice tank. And it was actually superseded by the M60 right here, which I'm going to take out before the M551. And this one is made by Excalibur 117. So there's actually two M60s here. So this is the normal one, which has a very well designed turret front. And it really makes the turret feel like kind of very rounded, which the other design will not have as much, but the other design will have a much more prominent engine deck, which is why I decided to keep both designs. So that's the M60, and we got the M60A3, which is then made by Kabukyog. Again, two very different designers, two very different takes on how to make an M60. This one has this very, very beautiful big back engine deck, which is probably one of the most iconic features of an M60 anyways, so it's definitely still recognizable. But now we're going to go over to the M551 Sheridan, which is a light tank prototype made by Nicer, which features a 150mm launcher more than cannon, as it is made to launch ATGMs as the main way of dealing with enemy targets. But as a 150mm gun, it does feature very big explosions, which is also quite nice, and the reload is actually not that bad. Of course, it is going to be a light tank, no protection, and its mobility is not too astonishing either. But you'll take what you can get, pretty much. And with that, we will be moving on to a Martyr 1A3, back to German designs, with a infantry fighting vehicle that features an autocannon. And, of course, the autocannon is stabilized and has a very high level gunner that can rotate it very, very quickly. Kind of too quickly, really. But it's a very interesting design, as it can just kind of deal with multiple targets really quickly. Of course, it will get very loud, and yeah, such can't really talk over this gun very effectively. But it's still a very nice design nonetheless. This one has been made by Excalibur. And after that one German design, we're going to go back to France by Mumu. We got the Mars 15. Another French light tank with a punchy gun, high mobility, and 0 armor protection. Don't know too much about this one, sadly. So again, comment down below if you guys know more. Moving on, again, we've got a very high amount of tanks here. It's going to be the Merca for the Mark III, which is still the same as from the Cold War pack, actually. So, the post-war pack, I mean. So I'm not really going to be talking about it much. Still the same design. Still same astonishingly cool looking turret. And that one was made by, again, Excalibur. So now we have a Sorio ET1 and T1120 prototype tanks. And I think these are Brazilian, but I honestly don't know. Again, you guys, please comment down below if you guys know more about them. So the 120 and then the normal one, both have just different guns. The rest is all identical. These were made by Nicer. And we also got the automatic here by Nicer, which is a Italian SPA, well, gun SPA, which is kind of unique for the time because it has a 105mm gun and only a fire rate of 2 rounds a second. But it had Brazilian diffusers, which made it very effective, and it was also capable of firing APFS DS rounds, which made it very popular in the game War Thunder, as it was capable of dealing with main battle tanks with just great contending with firepower. And thanks to its fire rate, of course, whenever it got off the first shot, it would generally just win in engagement there. But we also got a Speedpanzer 1C, made by G Games. A very small light tank, very similar to the Mars 15 and the ELC BIS, but I don't really know much about it, to be perfectly honest. It's very funny in Torpedo. It can definitely get stuck inside of a trench, that's for sure. So, yeah, you guys go have fun with this absolutely tiny little boy. And that's actually everything on the first page. We're gonna but we still have a second page. The SRV 103O, which is a prototype of the SRV 103, or otherwise known as the S tank. And it featured a 105mm gun that was fixed to the hull, so it couldn't elevate or turn horizontally either. And instead, the entire tank was aimed. So if the tank was aiming down or up, it would just aim like that. But it was having a pneumatic suspension, which was kind of unique to this tank, allowing it to aim the gun up or down. There's a benefit of all that stuff. You get a reload on only 4 seconds thanks to an autoloader on a 105mm gun. So the gun is very potent, and thanks to the absolutely impossible angle on the hull, it is very hard to penetrate as well, despite being very lightweight. But we do have a actual production variant as well. So the prototype was made by Coastal 5, while the production variant here was made by Excalibur 117. So this one actually has a lot of like spaced armor on the hull and turret, well, not really turret, the front hull here and the top of the hull, to deal with chemical warheads, as chemical warheads was still somewhat of a threat against this tank. So this armor here was all meant to counteract that. The little ribs on the hull actually were meant to denormalize the shell, so it would angle up further and had a higher chance to bounce off. But while the cage armor in the front was meant to prematurely detonate the chemical warheads. So next up, we got some more tanks by G Games, the T29 Heavy Tank prototype. So this one actually featured a 105mm gun. Among the 3 prototypes here, they all had different guns, but everything else was basically identical. But what's just as astonishing on this tank is the rounded turret. This one uses an absolute crap ton of parts to achieve a rounded turret design, would otherwise be impossible to recreate in this game. And I have so much respect for the, G Games for just having the patience to make a turret like this. Again, this is the T29 prototype heavy tank, and we also have the T30, which mounted a 150mm gun, and the T34, which mounted a 120mm gun. Everything else is identical on these tanks, just the gun being different. And then lastly, we've got 2 more tanks to go through. We've got a Vickers Mark 7, made by Aru. Vickers is actually making a whole bunch of tanks meant just for export, but I'm not actually sure how popular these were among the various nations. So if somebody could tell me more about this tank as well, please let me know. It is definitely well known for its absolutely humongous turret, though. Just look at the size of that thing. A very spacious turret, other very small hull. Looks kind of disproportionate. But yeah, other than that, we got 1 more tank, which is going to be the Exclamate. Again, made by Excalibur. He has been a major contribution to this pack. And this one actually has the add-on armor package, which makes it more of a medium tank than what it originally intended to be, namely a light tank. And it makes it much slower as well, but it's gonna still spot-on, and its mobility is not that terrible at this point, even though it has definitely decreased. Those are all the designs here. Again, if you wanna just download them, you can find the download down in the description. And you can, for the install, you can either check the Germany video or the last community replica pack video, as they will go into how to install this. But I'm kind of running out of time for this video, so I can't really go into the full install guide for time. So yeah, just check out those videos if you actually want to know how to install the packs, and the download will be down in the description below. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll catch you guys all in the next one.